Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judah, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the Full10Yards NFL Podcast.
It's that time of the week again, guys. It's time to dissect the latest happenings in the NFL. This is the Full 10 Yards NFL Podcast, and as always, I am your host, Sam Moores. And join me to flick through some takeaways from an eventful week 2 and look ahead to this weekend's football, which is an awesome slate as well. It's someone I'm sure you've all heard of. He's been on the podcast a couple of times before. It is, of course, NFL broadcaster and author Ben Isaacs. Welcome back, Ben.
Oh, glad to be back. Thanks for having me on. This is not something I would turn down. Love doing a show with you. Love your enthusiasm as always. So yeah, I mean, what a week it was last week. What a week is coming up. We are very much back in NFL season. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in full swing now. The London games are coming up as well for us in the UK, which is brilliant. It's just a really exciting time to be a football fan because after almost like 6-month break, where it's coming thick and fast now, and there's lots of football on TV.
Yeah, it's sometimes it takes until about week 3 that you feel like, okay, yeah, it's really back. But it just seemed to kind of hit us in the face with the first Thursday night game, and it's been relentless ever since. Certain teams look like they are in mid-season form, whereas others look like they're just kind of stuck in the mud. I know we're gonna get into those, but where I've been doing the Edge Rush show as part of the Nat Coombs show, where we're picking winners, and I am going to toot my own horn here because where we were picking against the spread last season, we could pick. Well, I mean, we could pick anything. You could have any kind of prop bet, but generally, I was going to pick a winner against the spread, and I had a particular strategy, and I had about a 70 to 75% hit rate on that show last season. Ollie Thornton said, like, professional gamblers, they're aiming for 60%. If you were putting like big money on this, you'd have done okay, and I have been awful this season. 0-2, which, okay, it's only 2 weeks into the season, but I picked the Bengals to cover against the Patriots, and that was way off. I picked the 49ers to cover against the Vikings. That was way off. It's not like I'm picking these winners against the spread and they're just eking out wins rather than blowing teams out. They're getting well beaten. And that's when okay, NFL season's really here. Things are crazy already and will probably just get crazier.
Yeah, it's certainly been the same in our subscribers survivor pool as well, because there's only about 3 people left and there's so many people entered. So everyone that's left has already won a prize. So we're in week 3 already. So that's that's just the way it's been this season. I'm the same. I did really well in week 1, and then last week I only got 3 scores right. So it's just the way it goes. And there certainly have been some upsets this season. So far, I will start with the talk of the league, really. We're going to go through some of the week 2 headlines, and there's only one place to start, and that's the Saints, who are 2-0 on the year after an impressive 44-19 win over the Cowboys in Dallas. 180-yard and 4-touchdown day for Alvin Kamara was a big reason why. Mike Zimmer's defense just couldn't stop him. It wasn't just Kamara, of course. Derek Carr was perfect again. The offensive line managed to nullify the threat of Micah Parsons as well, which is really difficult to do. Pretty much no one can do that. And it's a remarkable start from a team that wasn't fancied at all going into the season. The head coach was the favourite to get fired first. And here's a stat for you, Ben. They've scored 91 points through 2 games. That's the most by a team in 15 years. The last team to do that was Sean Payton's Saints in 2009, and that team went to go on and win the Super Bowl.
Now, also, they're only the 5th team in history to score 40-plus points 3 games in a row, because they managed it in the last week of last season, which doesn't mean a whole lot, and certainly wasn't enough to make people think, are the Saints a good team? People were generally down on the NFC South, and I don't blame them. I was one of them. I felt, okay, that's the Bucs division to lose because there's not a lot out there. I am a fan of Carr, actually. I think he's someone who can, with the right offense, the right coaches, he can win you games. I just didn't think that was the setup in New Orleans. And there are some surprising 2-0 teams, some surprising 0-2 teams, and we often get that at this point of the season. but it's not often you look at one of those surprising teams and you think, oh, there's no fluke here in those wins. Like, they were completely dominant in both games. Obviously, the first game was against the Panthers. The Panthers are probably the worst team in the league and got blown out. We learned nothing about the Saints from that game. Absolutely nothing. They went into the game against Dallas, and like most people, I think, I felt, okay, well, this is a wake-up call for them. Let's see how good they are. Let's see if they can hang with Dallas. And they just basically smashed Dallas in the face. And we'd seen a pretty good performance from Dallas in week 1. Maybe we need to look at that differently because of the way the Browns have been playing. Alvin Kamara feels like the key to this Saints team right now. And he is just like, he's rolling back the years. It's been such fun to watch him. Clint Kubiak, the OC there in New Orleans, has just worked miracles, because I don't feel like they've got such a good roster that they should be rolling over teams the way they have been doing. But his play calling has just kept defenses just off balance. So many, I can't remember what the percentage is, but if anyone can look it up, the percentage of drives that they've had where they have scored this year is so far ahead of everyone else, it's unreal. Now, whether they'll keep that up, I don't know, but everything they've shown us so far suggests this is a team that's a force to be reckoned with. I'm not saying they're going to the Super Bowl, but at this point, it's difficult to not see them in the playoffs. Dallas, meanwhile, a huge disappointment. The way that their defense was pushed around was such a surprise. I thought at least that's one thing that they can rely on. At certain points, their offense has kind of flattered to deceive, but that defense has been so stout and so reliable for them. But the Saints just did exactly what they wanted. And maybe we'll look back at the end of the season and say, well, yeah, the Saints have done that to almost everybody. We shall see. But Dallas will be looking at that game thinking, how did we just get kind of pushed around so much? Because it wasn't just lots of kind of fluky big plays. It was everything. That defense was dominated. And that's scary for Dallas because they've got so many solid players on that defense.
Yeah, and in fact, it was very similar to the Packers game in the playoffs as well. It was a very, the Saints got out to a really hot start, and then they had no run game, and they just couldn't come back from it because everyone knew what they were going to do. They're going to pass all the time, and the Saints, well, they've had a pretty good pass defense, or the first 2 games as well. So that's certainly a good sign for them. And with the Saints, nothing has really changed that much other than Kubiak, obviously, who you've mentioned. It's quite a surprise to them because they had a very quiet free agency, a really quiet free agency. That they addressed the offensive line in the draft, and and they got rid of Sean Payton's mate Pete Carmichael to bring in Kubiak as OC. Derek Carr's back into the West Coast offense, and every season that he's been in this offense, his 3 best have been in this offense. So back in 2016 with the Raiders, back obviously the year that they got to the playoffs in 2020 as well, and then this season he's on for a season that's very similar statistically so far to those 2 seasons. They've all been in the same offense. The different variations, of course, John Gruden's one was different, but they're all from the same tree, and it's worked the treat it has. It's a QB friendly scheme, and he looks on for another really good season. And the offense on a whole was just disappointing last year. They barely scored points at the start of it. They and they had so much sort of young talent, and then the offensive line was abysmal last year. It was so bad. Kamara lost a step. And then the line now is thriving in this scheme. They've only allowed 8 pressures over 2 games, and then Alvin Kamara has days like that, and you're thinking, oh well, like you mentioned, rolling back the years, and now now they're the scheme has really helped. That again, it is helped elevate the offenses of a lot of teams and the offensive line as well. The Dolphins are quite comparable. When McDaniel came over, the offensive line on paper looked terrible, but the scheme helped, especially the QB getting the ball out quickly. It helps the offensive line, and that has really helped the Saints. The protection better. The offensive line's back. Obviously, it's a good scheme for running the ball as well, which is good for Kamara. And then it's a very QB friendly scheme, and Derek Carr looks great.
Yeah, and I think we've got to give the credit to Kubiak because that's exactly it. This isn't a team that was overhauled. They didn't just redo the offense in the offseason. They just changed how they were going to approach their play calling. And it's worked perfectly for Derek Carr. And if it's working well for him, it's going to work well for the line. Everything is in sync right now. But obviously, it's worth bearing in mind that there wasn't much tape on this offense. I mean, there was basically no tape on the current offense going into week 1. It wouldn't have helped the Panthers anyway. Like the Panthers could have had the sports almanac from Back to the Future Part 2, and they wouldn't have been able to stop the Saints. But with the Cowboys, they'll have had that one game to go on. So they will have had something, but they couldn't stop it. The test will now be if once everyone knows exactly the offense they're running and everything they're doing, will they start to sputter a little bit? And maybe they will, maybe they won't, and they'll have their hiccups, but this is a team that's going to be really exciting to watch in more ways than one.
Yeah, and fair play to Dennis Allen as well, because he was, like I say, he was in the hot seat, favourite to be fired. His defense is playing a lot better now. They've managed to get some really good play out of Chase Young in the first 2 games, and obviously in Washington before he came over to San Francisco in the second half of last year, he struggled. Starts really good. Tyrann Mathieu as well, despite his age, is having a great start to the season as well. And then Alontae Taylor in the slot as well. He's been one of the best players in the entire league this season so far. He's already got 3 sacks, couple pass breakups as well from the slot. So they're certainly using him very well. So yeah, this is Dennis Allen coming out firing, and fair play to the Saints. We'll see how they got on rest of the year, as you mentioned, when there's a lot of tape on them, but right now they certainly look at one of the teams to beat in the NFL, which was a nice surprise. Now two more teams that we thought would be in the conversation are the Bengals and the Chiefs, and they met in week 2, which is just mad having those 2 teams meeting with week 2. Obviously, New Zealand playing towards the end of the season, fighting for the 1 seed. But the way the schedule worked this year, the Chiefs started with the Ravens and the Bengals, 2 very difficult games for the Chiefs, and they've won them both. They're now 2-0 after Mahomes beat Burrow at Arrowhead. It looked like Burrow would move to 4-1 over the 3-time MVP in the regular season, but a pass interference penalty on Cincy on 4th and 16 set up a Harrison Butker game-winning field goal. It was a shame that we got this game so early in the season, I think, but it was certainly a fun one to watch. I prefer to watch it down the line, but it was probably the game of the week. They basically eliminated the rest of the late window so everyone could watch this game. And, I think, other than maybe the referees at the end, which we'll talk about, this was certainly one of the games of the week to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, see, I like the fact they were playing this early, especially because the Bengals started 0-1, which they really shouldn't have done. They had so much more talent than the Patriots, and they were outfought by the Patriots. So then you've got a situation where, unlike if, say, they're 10-2 and they know they're going to make the playoffs, and you obviously want to beat the Chiefs, and you're going for that home field advantage through the playoffs. It just felt like there was a little bit more at stake here, because the fear of going 0-2 is a big one when you are a playoff chasing team. And later on we can talk about those 0-2 teams. But I liked seeing it now. It felt like there was this extra bit of jeopardy. But to be fair to the Bengals, whereas they played pretty poorly against New England, they did play well against Kansas City. They certainly did enough to win. We can talk about that. We can talk about that call and whether it should have been given, whether it was a soft one to give away, and maybe it was. But the Chiefs just keep pulling these out. And you look at the sort of offense that the Chief runs, and it's very easy kind of at first glance to see them as like very much a kind of a speed and finesse team. But then you see them play, and it's just, they're a hard-working, kind of gritty team that will grind out wins. And you don't usually get flashy teams that will grind out wins, and this is what they do. And obviously Andy Reid is one of the best head coaches of all time. So I said it. But the Bengals were the main story here, because they, for large chunks of the game, they outplayed Kansas City, and yet they've fallen to 0-2, and that is a hole, and that is bad for them. But they've shown the Chiefs can be there to be got at, and the Ravens did the same. The Chiefs, I've never seen a team as good as this rely on, I feel harsh saying rely on luck, but this is still a great team. It's not that they win games because of luck. And you can say you make your own luck, or great teams pull these ones out, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's not like great teams never lose in silly fashion. I mean, the Patriots had an unbeaten regular season and somehow managed to conspire to lose in the Super Bowl. Was that not a great team? It was one of the greatest teams of all time, easily the best team that's never won a Super Bowl. But the Chiefs are great, and yet they just find themselves in these positions where they just get the rub of the green a little bit. And In week 1, his toe was just over. If the shoes were a different color, you probably couldn't see. This one with the pass interference call and everything the Bengals did, it was a really, really good game. I'm glad it was in week 2, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if we're seeing part 2 later on in the year, in January. But that will, at this rate, that's definitely going to be at Arrowhead.
Yes, that's because obviously the Bengals sit at 0-2, and for the Chiefs as well, going for their three-peat, having 2 massive AFC wins against the Ravens and the Bengals is going to be massive for getting the 1 seed. If it does come down to that, certainly with the Bengals as well. Again, I think they've done it so many times before. They always start in September. I think Zach Taylor's about 6-12 or something in September as head coach of the Bengals, which is just mental. And again, they're going to have a losing record, or at least a losing record in September to start the year. But I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a lot more positive about them than I did a week ago, because they just look. Because against the Patriots, they're rusty. Again, they were out coached as well, you could say. In that game, obviously you could tell that Jamar Chase missed all of camp. The fumble aside, in this game, Joe Burrow was great. If you look at the PFF grades, he's one of the top sort of 5, 6, 7 passers in the league this week. The defense was a lot better because they were dreadful against the Patriots, and that's the thing that disappointed me the most. They just couldn't stop Ramondre Stevenson. He had over 100 yards after contact. They're just missing every single tackle possible, and although I am still concerned about that because the Chiefs did run the hell out of the ball in this game. Now we've seen the Bengals. They look like the Bengals rolled a little bit in that game, so I do feel a lot more positive about them. And with how the Browns and the Ravens have started as well, I do think they'll be a playoff team. Whether they win the division or not, we'll see. They've still got to play every game in a division so far, but and they're normally much better later in the year anyway. But I do feel like the Bengals showed me something. It's just they found a way to lose, and the Chiefs are so good at winning games that are so close like this.
Yeah, and like I say, if this game was in December and they were 10-2, 10-3, or something like that, they played well and they'd lost, you wouldn't feel like, oh God, problems in Cincinnati. You'd feel like, okay, well look, if these teams meet in the playoffs, they will feel like, okay, we can get them. But because it's happened now, they're looking at the record, they're looking at other teams around them thinking, okay, well, it's an uphill struggle now to get to the playoffs. Still only 2 games in, but you have that jeopardy. But the Bengals have shown they're a good team. We knew they were a good team, but my God, they showed us the absolute opposite against New England. Now this looks like the real Bengals. Looks like, them kind of failing in September, so we know it's the Bengals. But it does look like a team that has playoff quality, which, considering they're winless, is it's a bit unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really weird. We'll move over to the NFC now, because we had one hell of a game in the NFC in the early window, where the Bucs went into Detroit and got revenge on the Lions after they defeated them in the same building in last year's divisional round. Looking at the numbers of this game, you'd be shocked that the Lions lost. They had 463 yards, 200 odd for the Bucs, over double offensive yards. But the Bucs, like the Chiefs, because they have a knack of winning games that are close. Their defense is great. They're very well coached. They won the turnover battle. Their defense held Detroit to 1-7 in the red zone. So obviously that's a big factor, forcing them to field goals. They managed to clock better. They had half the plays that Detroit ran, but they only had a few minutes left of the ball. They had 26 minutes left of the ball. A couple good drafts, a good offensive situation for Baker Mayfield, and that has really set this team up to succeed well. Because I tell you what, 18 months ago or so, we did not see the Bucs really being a contender in the NFC South. They had a strong year last year, and again they've got a young team. They're coached well. Again, I keep saying it, before the season, Todd Bowles was about 5th favourite to be fired, and that made no sense to me because of the way the team played last year. And we're seeing this year is carried on, a bit of continuity. The younger players are getting better, and they know how to win games. And they managed to get through this one.
Yeah, you're right about the continuity, because the way that it was a kind of slow burn for them last season, and they looked better as the year went on. Nobody took them particularly seriously at the beginning. People were happy to talk down Baker Mayfield. People were happy to talk down Bowles as well. And it came to the end of the season. You felt like this is a legitimate playoff team, and they gave the Lions all they could handle in the playoffs. And yes, the Lions deserve to win. So I was really looking forward to this game. I thought the Lions would win, but I thought this is going to be something where we'll come out of this and say, okay, look, the Bucs didn't win this, but this is a good team. and this is the team that's going to win the NFC South based on what we're going to see. And they went better than that. They just happened to not outshine another particular NFC South team in the Saints. I was impressed with the protection of Baker Mayfield. He had the time he needed. I mean, Baker Mayfield's a big story in himself. You know, he's been knocking around the NFL for like 7 years, whatever it is now. Plenty of people were happy to label him a bust. The way it all went down in Cleveland, he's now found the right place for him, and he's really grown as a player. His decision making is so much better. He seems like he's in his happy place right now. The offense just is a pretty straightforward one, and it works for everything that he wants to do. He's got those weapons, and the Bucs can finish a game. The Lions will be looking at the game thinking, we can't let those get away from us, because we're going to play teams of this quality in the playoffs. I mean, I'm still pretty confident the Lions are going to be in the playoffs. Still pretty confident they're going to win the NFC North, in fact. And losing to this Bucs team is no shame, especially when they have got talent, and Baker Mayfield is probably going to have the best year of his career. But there were just certain points where they just couldn't make the breakthrough. You know, they kind of late fourth down tackle with like a minute left that looked like they were kind of potentially going to get the game winning score. You know, they're only 6 yards out or whatever it was. This Lions team has just got to get a bit hardier. And I didn't think I was going to be saying that, because they're a gritty bunch. But this is the sort of game that you've got to grind out against the playoff rival at home. You've got to have it so that Jared Goff is not making some silly mistakes. And Jared Goff, still, like Baker Mayfield, a player who was picked in the first round, was felt that not quite a bust, because obviously he did go to a Super Bowl, but people felt, well, that was nothing to do with him. That was just the coaching. Turns out he's pretty good. He is still a system quarterback, I think. They're going to win games, not win games despite him, but he's a game manager, let's face it. And if you're going to have a game manager like Jared Goff, he's got to manage the game, which means not throwing those crucial picks. But this Bucs team is already looking like this is a playoff team. And a lot of people picked them for the NFC South, and will feel like, okay, well, maybe I'm right, depending on what happens with the Saints.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the Lions as well, 9 times out of 10 they win this game. They left points on the board, and that was the issue. As I mentioned, 1 of 7 in the red zone. They also had the moment at the end of the first half where they'd be kicking themselves because they left 3 points at least on the board. At the end, they were at Tampa Bay 9. The field goal unit came on early, and so they had too many men on field, and they got penalised for that. And then there was a runoff on the clock. And obviously out of Tampa Bay 9, that's guaranteed points pretty much. The clock ran out, and they left points on the board. Dan Campbell took responsibility for that. He said that he lost the team the game. Which, I mean, that shows obviously leader. That's what he's certainly been a very impressive head coach in his tenure there. And again, as I mentioned, they win this game more often than not. I'm not really concerned that they lost it, because they have won games like that against teams before. I think it's just, in fact, I actually feel weirdly better about them now than I did before the game, because their defense had another good week, and the Lions' Achilles heel the last couple of years has been their defense. They've been able to score so many points. Coming into this game, we thought it'd be a shootout because it's two high scoring offenses. It was the opposite. It was a defense fest, and both defenses play really well. The Lions prevented Baker, who threw all over the shop in week 1. They prevented him to 146 passing yards. Aiden Hutchinson sacked him 5 times.
He was ridiculously good.
If they play like that all year, they're going to be fancy for a Super Bowl run, because they look like they finally got the defense to pair with that offense.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Bengals, where yes, they lost, but yes, what we saw was this is a team that is really good. It just happened to be they lost against a team that they could meet in the playoffs. This is another conference rival that you're going to need to get past potentially. But yeah, Lions fans who've had a rough, half century before the last couple of years certainly shouldn't be too disappointed after a game like this. You're going to lose some like this, but you're also going to be, gutsing out some wins that you perhaps don't deserve, and they have done that because they've got such character. And I'm not ashamed to hold my hands up and say I got Dan Campbell all wrong. I really didn't think that he was going to be the coach that he has. I thought he was going to be all kind of bluster, and that'll maybe get you through half a season, but that's it. And obviously, he is the man there, and the players absolutely love him, and they will have really appreciated the fact that he took the heat off some individual errors by holding his hands up and saying, the bad clock management and those sort of decisions that cost them the game. Partly did, partly didn't, but he was happy to stand up and say, look, this one's on me, and the players will appreciate that, and they'll be well up for it against Arizona next week.
Absolutely, that's going to be one hell of a game as well with the way the Cardinals have looked so far. We'll stick in the NFC North. We'll go over to the Vikings now, who are now 2-0 on the season, upsetting the Niners in the early window. Brian Flores' defense was a star of the show, frustrating Kyle Shanahan for a second season running to get the victory, and then confusing the hell out of Brock Purdy with many exotic looks, as Flores has done to many QBs in his time over in Miami, and also running the defense here now in Minnesota. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays in this one, Purdy did. He was also sacked 6 times in their second game without Christian McCaffrey, and one where they lost Deebo Samuel to a calf injury too. Before we get on to the Vikings, this was quite a stark difference from the Jets game for the Niners, wasn't it? Because they had utter control over that one, and then they were dominated in this game.
Yeah, I think their performance against the Jets was the best performance of week 1 in terms of relative to who they were playing. The Jets going into the season looking like a team that should contend for the AFC East, should be a team in the playoffs, and the 49ers absolutely dominated that game without Christian McCaffrey, which is, he is their best player. So I felt very confident based on what I'd seen against the Jets, that the 49ers would have no trouble with the Vikings. With Sam Darnold, how can they not win this? Because they can put pressure on this guy and he'll make mistakes. But it just feels like they're perhaps cursed against the Vikings. I know it's been decades since they last beat the Vikings on the road. I know that doesn't mean much, but it's just a weird one. But they were unable to stop Justin Jefferson. They were just unable to stop. They were unable to stop the wide receivers in general. They allowed Sam Darnold much too much time. They made a lot of mistakes, and I was actually talking to a late night or early morning, depending on your perspective, show with Paul Ross on Talk Sports at the end of last week. And he was saying, how much will the time zone factor into this game with the 49ers on a slightly shorter week, having to fly cross country, play in a different time zone? And I said, it's overblown, because although it's 10 a.m. for them, what you tend to find is that the good teams, they win anyway. And then the bad teams will always struggle with those big time zone leaps. And the 49ers are a good team, not a bad team, but you would not have known it from Sunday. Just so many mistakes. Brock Purdy showed the things that I think a lot of 49ers fans have been, some of the more skeptical 49ers fans, let's say, worried that at some point, will Purdy's luck run out? Will there be certain points where if he hasn't got his safety blankets around him, can he do it on his own? And he can't. Again, game manager, which isn't necessarily a criticism as long as you do manage the games. But he did make mistakes. But the Vikings, my God, who saw this? Who saw this coming? Even if it was Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy, I don't think anyone would have assumed at the start of the season they'd have looked ahead and looked at that 49ers game and thought, oh yeah, that's a comfortable win. The 49ers will come in here and they'll get pushed around. Incredible credit. Incredible credit to all of the Vikings. Sam Darnold, brilliant. But that Brian Flores defense just shut down that 49ers offense. And the Vikings have become one of the most intriguing teams in the league now, just off the back of that.
Yeah, I think it just shows how good of a situation Darnold's in as well. I mean, he shone in this game, obviously, like a mini revenge game, obviously, because there was talk going into last off-season whether it would be him or Purdy starting for the Niners, because there was a lot of people in that building that were arguing that maybe Darnold should start at the start of last year. Then Purdy had a great year last year, and obviously vindicated that decision. And then Darnold, he's now in his 4th stop, and he's certainly showing for it. He combined with Jefferson for the play of the weekend, 97-yard touchdown pass. that was just brilliant to watch that play. And then Jefferson became the youngest receiver to reach 6,000 yards this week as well. So that was a good day to do it on. I think, like with Baker Mayfield, obviously same draft class, picked a couple of picks apart in that draft as well. In a good situation with one of the best offensive coaches in the league, I think it just shows how important it is where young quarterbacks land. And I think we're seeing a sort of similar situation now with Bryce Young. We'll go into this a little bit now because he was benched in favour of Randy Dalton for performance reasons this week. And obviously his situation last year was awful, one of the worst I've ever seen. And it looks like they've left him a little bit broken as a quarterback. And they spent money. They've improved the offensive line this year. And they have. There was a league low of just 4 pressures on Sunday for the Panthers. And he still looked lost, and I think that it's unfortunate to see. But again, I think it is where you land and what situation you have, but more than sometimes how high you're drafted. Because we're seeing it now with the renaissance of people like Goff and Baker and now Sam Darnold. It is where it is really important the destination you go to and the situation you're in. So yeah, just thoughts on the decision from Canales after 2 games to bench Bryce Young.
I put it this way: if you played the first 2 games of this season and you swapped Patrick Mahomes and Bryce Young, the Panthers still aren't winning those games. And that's not to say that Bryce Young's been fine, they're blaming the wrong person. There's a lot of blame to go around. Now, if you bench him now because you feel like you've got more chance of winning with Andy Dalton, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But to what end? Are you making the playoffs? No, you are absolutely not. That roster is paper thin. If Andy Dalton has a good season, you are still not making the playoffs. So then what? It's a head coach trying to keep his job. And you think, I got 7 wins. I should keep my job. What are you going to do? Build it around Andy Dalton? Are you going to draft another quarterback? If you do manage to win some games with Andy Dalton, well, you're not picking as high as you would have hoped. If you do want a quarterback, it's probably not a good quarterback for drafts to be trying to draft next year. That could still change, but it doesn't look like it right now. I don't know what the end game is. I don't see the point of benching Bryce Young. You are not going to make the playoffs anyway. You're not going to have a winning record. If you feel that it's going to be better for Bryce Young's development for him to not play, then maybe, but probably that should have happened in the first season, not at this point, and damage his confidence. Is he broken beyond all repair? If you'd asked me that a decade ago, I'd probably say, yeah, he's going to be done. But we've seen so many rehabilitation projects in the league, and I could imagine a situation where we're doing a podcast in 3 years' time, you and I, looking a bit more old and a bit more skeptical about everything, and saying, well, the such and such team with Bryce Young started the season 2-0. Bryce Young's looking really good. He's finally showing that potential. The situation he's in there in Carolina is the worst in the league. It's the worst run organization in the NFL. It's the worst roster in the NFL. And this is a stupid decision. I do not see the upside. I just don't see the point. Everything you should be doing if you're a bad team should be the long-term future, not, okay, well, maybe we'll win a couple more games. Who cares? Just, it's pointless. And I like Andy Dalton. He's a steady pair of hands, but what's the point?
Yeah, I think this is the Panthers now are looking a bit like the Browns did like 7 or 8 years ago, where they were just for like 4, 5, 6 seasons they were just organizationally so poorly run. And yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, he was getting their offensive line terrible. Last year was terrible. This year it has got better, and he had time to throw, and he was making stupid decisions. So obviously the receivers aren't great, and that doesn't help. But I wouldn't have benched him, especially when you see Daniel Jones still. He's had 60-odd starts, and we still don't know who Daniel Jones is yet. It's a sort of comparable situation there. But I think it just shows how poorly run the Panthers are more than anything, if I'm being honest with you. Just before we get on to week 3, we'll talk about one final game. That was Thursday Night Football, almost a week ago now. Going back to the start of the week, where the Bills took an early lead in the AFC's title race by dominating the Dolphins in all 3 phases. It was quite literally a nightmare for the Dolphins, who lost to the Bills once more. They're now 12-2 against the Bills in the last 6 seasons. The Bills have won the last 5 straight, and one of those was in the playoffs. In our keys to victory that we did last week, we said the Dolphins needed to start fast, they needed to win the turnover battle, and they needed to carry on being better in short yardage because they looked like they improved at that against Jacksonville. And then it was quite clear by the end of the first quarter that none of that was going to happen. And then the Buffalo defense just has the kryptonite for this offense. No one plays them what the Bills do. They pat the middle of the field. They made Tua throw uncomfortable throws outside the numbers to receivers 3, 4, 5 to tight ends 2, 3, 4, taking away Hill and Waddle. And it didn't go very well. One interception that wasn't really his fault, and then one that was terrible. And then things went from bad to worse when he collided with Damar Hamlin when scrambling for a first down, and he hit his head in the back of the turf again, unfortunately. He exited the game with his third diagnosed concussion. It's probably expected as fourth one because he had one against Buffalo a couple of years ago. That was ruled a different injury. And he's already been ruled out for this game in Seattle this week. He's also just been put on into reserve, so he's out for the next 4 weeks. For a player likely on his fourth brain injury in 3 seasons, player safety is, of course, a massive topic in the league. This week in the news, some pundits and former players have suggested he should retire for his long-term health benefits. Some have disagreed. It's been quite an interesting conversation. The good news is that Tua has responded really well. He's already back in the building, talking to players, coaches, talking to teammates and neurologists as well. And according to Ian Rappaport, he's not expected to retire, although nothing is confirmed yet there, of course. Obviously, concussions are difficult things. A player has to clear 4 stages in the concussion protocol to be cleared to play, 3 to do anything football related in practice as well. So it's quite a complicated process. But the early signs that he would be back sooner rather than later. He did get put on injured reserve yesterday, but Pro Football Network reported that the Dolphins weren't sure if they even would have needed to. He responded that well to it, which is a good sign for both player and team. Obviously, the Dolphins, their season now isn't looking as positive as maybe it would have done a couple of weeks ago, but they have got a pretty easy schedule coming up now. So if it has happened at a good time for the Dolphins, you could say, with the tougher games to be played after Tua come back on injured reserve. What do you make on the expected decision to him carry on playing?
I really think he should retire. I think you don't mess around with your brain. He is prone to concussion. I can see why he'd want to play. Why would he not? But the long-term impacts, and we still don't fully understand concussions because we still don't fully understand the brain. And I'm glad that you put it as a brain injury, because that's the only way to show how stark this is. It's if someone says they've got a leg injury. If you met someone and they said like, "Oh, I haven't been able to go running, I've got a leg injury," you went, "Oh, okay, what have you done?" And they twisted your ankle or whatever. If someone said, "Oh, I've injured my brain," you'd be like, "Holy hell, this sounds terrible. What's going on? What have the doctors said?" If they said to you, "Oh, I keep injuring my brain because of my job," you'd say, "I think you should get a different job." And if that person had earned enough money in his job to retire, you'd probably say, maybe just don't work then. Or at least retire from that job, do something you love that doesn't involve potential injury to your brain. It scares me that we're gonna have a story in 15 years' time where here's Tua Tagovailoa and he can't remember his kids' names, and there's all this, and isn't this really sad? And should the NFL have done something? But I don't think the NFL can. I don't think the NFL can ban a player because he keeps getting injured. I think that's something that only that player can say. And I think his drive to play is so strong that he will carry on unless doctors prevent it from happening. That's my perspective on it. You're right. It's kind of come at a good time for the Dolphins if something like that can ever come at a good or bad time. It is a bit of an easier schedule right now. Whether they're set up to win those games, I don't know. They're in a tough division. The Bills really showed what they were.
Oh.
Buffalo came into that game riddled with injuries, and the way they performed and people stepping up like Jamarcus Ingram with a couple of picks. The Bills are looking really good. Josh Allen's looking good. Obviously to them, showed on Thursday, this is what the team can do. This is how deep the roster is. This is a team with still with Super Bowl aspirations, even though it's felt like the last couple of years they've got a bit weaker. I wouldn't want to bet against them. I was really looking forward to that game, and it looked like he was potentially getting away from the Dolphins even before the Tua injury. But this Bills team looked really, really good, and we'll learn more about them in the coming weeks. But right now, I really like what I see from Buffalo.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if they don't win this division. I really would, because they know how to beat every single team in it really well. Like, they outcoach. McDermott does get outcoached sometimes in the playoffs, but in this division he owns it. He outcoaches every single one of the head coaches there, and that is really something in division. And yeah, for the Dolphins, it is an interesting thing that obviously they're sitting as it has been the last couple of years, wild card round, see where you go from there, and I think that's just. With Tua, yeah, I agree. He probably should retire. I don't think he will unless he's medically forced to. And it is a difficult situation, but we'll keep you updated over the week and as the weeks go on the podcast. Right, let's get on to week 3 now. There's a couple 0-2. Well, I say a couple. There are 9 0-2 teams heading into week 3. 3 in the NFC, a whopping 6 in the AFC. The 0-2 teams are the Giants, the Panthers, the Rams in the NFC, and in the AFC, the Broncos, the Titans, the Colts, the Jags, the Bengals, and the Ravens. 5 of the 9 teams had winning records last year, whilst 4 of the teams that missed the playoffs last year are currently unbeaten. So it just shows how much of a competitive cycle the league is. We're going to go through a couple of these teams, just say which ones we're worried about and why. As you're the guest, Ben, I'll let you go first.
Okay, well, I'll bring up the Giants first because this team is trash. They're 0-2. They shouldn't be worried about being 0-2 because they should have known they were going to be 0-2. Daniel Jones has not worked out. They need a big boy quarterback. I'm amazed they've invested so much money in the guy. It's a bad situation. It's a bad situation for the Giants. Not a surprise they're 0-2, and this is not going to be a playoff season by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, luckily for them, Malik Neighbours has looked really good. Obviously, the first round draft choice. And then, yeah, for them, there is hope because Daniel Jones' contract, there isn't out at the end of this year. So this may be his last year starting. And then if there is someone they like out of the draft, maybe it's Cam Ward or Quinn Ewers if he's healthy or something like that. But maybe they could take a shot there. But we'll see what happens with them. But yeah, there's certainly nothing to be excited about at the moment for Giants fans, or for what is on the field anyway. For me, I'm a little bit worried about the Jags, if I'm being honest. Because 2 weeks in a row, you've lost a game that you probably shouldn't have, if I'm being honest. Yeah, you're heading into a Monday night game against Buffalo. They're off a mini bye as well, so obviously they've got extra time to prepare. Again, one of the 3 best teams in the league. And then there's 2 more division games before heading into the London pair. And I'm just a little bit worried because they seem to have carried on a few of the traits from the collapse last year. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, although being behind a terrible offensive line, he continues to just be an average, sort of to above average. And there's nothing that really stands out at the moment, which is he's in a difficult situation because he's getting run at all the time. And then, yeah, they have struggled to win at home a little bit as well. It's a shame because I absolutely love the talent on this team. I love the defense as well. I'm excited to see him play in London. But yeah, I am a little bit worried about because everyone wants this job. I've heard they're talking about this on quite a few podcasts this week. It's like this, everyone wants to be the person to fix Trevor Lawrence. If Doug Peterson isn't careful, he could find himself on the hot seat a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and they can easily find themselves 0-3, and they do have a playoff caliber roster, but it's a long way back from 0-3, and you'll find lots of stats about how many teams have made the playoffs after starting 0-2, and it's not a high number. And I kept seeing these numbers, and I got frustrated because I thought, okay, well, the thing is that in the last few years, the NFL has gone to 17 regular season games. So those 2 games are a slightly smaller sample size now. And also an extra team in each conference makes the playoffs. So the stats are misleading. And I thought, okay, well, let's look back over the last few years. Oh, only 1 team. Since the playoffs expanded and the NFL went to 17 regular season games, only 1 team has ever started 0-2 and made the playoffs. Now that will change. That's a small sample size. That's only a few years. But you look at those teams that are 0-2. The Jaguars are one of those teams that would very much expect to make the playoffs. could easily be 0-3 by the end of the week, and then you've got a real problem.
Certainly, and it's the same for the Ravens as well, sitting at 0-2 now. Now again, the Chiefs game, I thought it looked brilliant. To be fair, I thought Lamar was excellent until the final drive. The time was dwindling, he did miss a couple of throws, and then obviously Isaiah Likely's catch in the end zone was just out of bounds. So that could be a very different story. And then this week against the Raiders, that was a little bit concerning, the way they blew a double-digit lead again. They've got a habit of blowing double-digit leads at this point. I think in the last couple of years, they've about 7 or 8 now that they've done that in the fourth quarter. Now, fair play to the Raiders. Again, I think Antonio Pierce has got them coached hard. I was kind of surprised to not see them on this list, if I'm being honest. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the Ravens? Because it's kind of surprising to see them at 0-2.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of wipe the first one from your memory, because it's the Chiefs, and there's an alternate universe where that catch was just inbounds and they won on a 2-point conversion, and the Bengals didn't give up that penalty, and the Chiefs are 0-2. So the margins are very fine, but it's the way they blew it against the Raiders that is concerning. Whereas, for certain teams, you might feel like, okay, well, they've been playing good teams. The Raiders were made to look good by the Ravens. That collapse was pretty stupid, and those are mental errors. This is a team that I still think can win that division. I feel like the 2 best teams in that division, the AFC North, are 0-2. The Ravens and the Bengals have not got a win between them. The Steelers are much happier, but the Ravens are very much a playoff team. And I still think that, like, the Bengals, I think, should make the playoffs, as we already talked about. I think the Ravens will still make the playoffs. The Jaguars maybe, but already that's 3 teams 0-2 who still, I think, have got a real shot at the playoffs, despite the fact the only team to ever do it in the current format are the Texans last year, I guess. So I'm not panicking about this Ravens team, but if they play like they did in the second half against the Raiders, then this is a team that is very beatable. They need the one that turned up at Kansas City.
Their offensive line's been very disappointing, I think, because they're not creating the running lanes with Derrick Henry, who's had quite a disappointing start. He's been blown up a lot of the time in the backfield, which is so weird, seeing Derrick Henry just not getting any yards. And Lamar is having to move a lot more than he did last year as well. There was quite a few starters on the offensive line in the off-season, and that is starting to show. So hopefully they can get a little bit better. Just going through a few more of the teams now. I think we've done Giants, the Panthers. I already talked about them a little bit. The Rams, I think for them, I've been really impressed with the way they are against the Lions. I thought I was really impressed by the way they played. For them, it's so many injuries have occurred that they're down to, I think they're missing 4 offensive linemen now. Obviously, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are both injured as well. And a few players on defense are injured as well. I think for the Rams it is a bit disappointing, but because they looked so good last year, their young team that they have now, they've got so many injuries that they got blown out in last week.
Yeah, and almost beat the Lions. And then it's a different story. But when you lose that much talent, as they have done through injury, it's very, very difficult. But again, this is a team that looks, if they get those players back on the field, this is a team that's going to be winning games. This isn't the Giants. This isn't the Panthers. This is potentially a good team, and a team that, I mean, maybe the playoffs are out of the question, but that's much more to do with the injury luck they've had rather than the fact they're 0-2 right now.
Yeah, and then there's the 3 in the AFC: the Broncos, Titans, and Colts. I kind of feel a bit similar about all these teams, to be fair. The Colts, I'm really disappointed in because, again, they had a winning record last year. They had a lot of hope going into this season. They've brought back all of their guys in free agency. They paid all of them as well, managed to bring them all back. And then their defense is really disappointing because they're getting run over everywhere. And then previously, they've got quite a good interior. They've been very, very good at stopping the run. And then, the last 2 weeks, they've just been absolutely dominated. And Anthony Richardson, he's had his highs and lows. There are more lows this week, which is a little bit concerning as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you've got to remember with Anthony Richardson is that he has not started many games in his life. Like since he finished high school, it's there are not many games he started in college. He's not started many in the NFL. He's still quite raw, and he's already someone who looks to run perhaps a little bit too early rather than kind of waiting for the pass to open up. He gets a little bit impatient. He trusts his legs a little bit too much. So I worry about his development. I wasn't too hot on him coming out of college anyway, but it looked like the Colts were doing everything they could to build around him. They have been disappointing. They've been weaker in seems every area compared with last season. And, that's a potentially winnable division. It's a weird one, the AFC South. So, yeah, it's out of those teams. I mean, there are a lot of teams. When I say a lot of teams, there are various teams there when you say like the Titans and Broncos as well as the Colts, who have all got a young quarterback that they're trying to develop, and it's not necessarily going according to plan. Different with the Broncos because that's someone who's only been in the league 5 minutes. But Anthony Richardson and Will Levis are both people who need to show more, especially Will.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they're 2 plays from Levis away from being 2-0. The Titans are two stupid plays. They could have easily beaten the Bears, and then they only lost by a score to the Jets as well. So had they scored from that drive, it could be talking at the Titans 2-0, and because they have looked good at points, their defense has played well. The offense line's been a lot better since Bill Callahan came in to obviously coach under his son, and they've been impressed. But unfortunately, it's 2 plays that have cost the Titans 2 wins for Levis. And then for Denver, Bo Nix didn't look great in the first game. I can't lie, but in this game, his average depth of target doubled in this game. He pushed downfield a lot more, and I thought he looked better in this game for the Broncos. So there is that, but the Broncos, unfortunately, they're just so talentless. They're a bit like the Panthers and the Giants. That it's going to be a tough season for him because there's not much talent on that team.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're a Broncos fan, you probably weren't going into the season thinking you're going to make the playoffs. You're probably going into it thinking, I want to see Bo Nix establish himself as the undisputed starter and face of the franchise and the guy that we can build around. Have we seen that in the first 2 weeks? No, but there's only so much you're going to see in those 2 weeks, especially when he hasn't got much around him. Not the biggest Bo Nix fan, but I would say if you're a Broncos fan who's getting stressed, just be patient because these things do take a bit of time. Sean Payton really wanted Bo Nix, felt like this is the guy. This is the guy to run the offense that I want to run. It's going to take a bit of time.
Absolutely. Right, we'll move on to Thursday Night Football now because this one is a fun one. The second All-AFC East matchup in a row on Thursday night as we see the Patriots head to MetLife for the Jets home opener. Both teams sit 1-1 and they were involved in tense finishes last week. The Patriots lost in the dying embers in overtime at home to Seattle, whilst the Jets were late winners in Tennessee. As the home team, we'll start with the Jets. They put in a much improved performance on the road to win in Tennessee, but there are some concerns because they could have quite easily lost that game. I think they're going to need to be a lot better to beat this New England defense because this New England defense is so good. But it was a start for them after being dominated by the Niners the week before. Aaron Rodgers put together a vintage drive to win that game, and which is good to see because he threw to pretty much all of his weapons. He distributed the ball well. I think he was 5 for 5 on that drive. It was vintage Aaron Rodgers. For them, it was perfect for Jets fans, I'm sure. There's still a bit to be worried about for them. We'll get onto that later on. But for Jets fans that have been deprived at that position certainly for so long, it must have felt so good to see a QB lead a team to win a game in that way.
Yeah, and if you're a Jets fan who has endured so many seasons of putting up any random quarterback against Tom Brady, and now you've got Aaron Rodgers against Jacoby Brissett, you must feel like, this is going to be sweet. But will it be sweet on Thursday? Because I just don't know. Because the big disappointment, as far as I'm concerned, for the Jets has been that defense that I felt was going to be pretty good, and it's not been pretty good. It's been pretty poor. Whereas the Patriots defense has been good. So if they can step up. If that defense can step up against the Patriots and their offensive line has been a weak point, and they can put pressure on Jacoby Brissett, and that Jets defense has not been very good at putting on pressure anywhere. this season. If they can get in Jacoby Brissett's face, then they can win the game. But the Patriots have overachieved. This team is playing above its talent level, and I'm willing to throw that first game out the window in terms of the Jets 49ers game. I think the Jets just made a mess of that, and they pulled their starters. Like, there was no point getting people hurt. Just move on to week 2. I think we're going to start to see the real Jets, but I'm really intrigued by this Patriots team. The way they fought against the Bengals. This is a team that's going to be a tough out for anybody, and this is obviously a divisional game. These teams hate each other. I would have thought at the start of the season, there's no way they're going to be able to stop Aaron Rodgers. But now, having seen that Patriots defense, I don't know. This is one where I think the Jets will win, but I think they're going to make it difficult for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Patriots this year feel like sort of last year's Cardinals, where you think they're going to be in a lot of games. They're very well coached, you could say as well. They're not talented at all on paper, especially on offense. They're not, but they're they coach very hard. They play smart, disciplined football. It's kept them in both games so far this year. Obviously, it won them the Bengals game. Yeah, and dare I say, I don't actually think they played that hard for Belichick last year, because they didn't look like a Belichick coach team last year, which is the most impressive thing. And it is a great thing for Gerard Mayo. Obviously, Belichick picked him as his successor, because even without Christian Barmore, the defense is playing well. They've got hope at quarterback too. If I'm a Patriots fan, I'm excited about the future of what you've seen in the first 2 games. Yeah,
and that is the opposite of what I thought they would have felt at this point. That they would feel like, oh God, we are going to have to get worse before we get better. This roster's so thin. But Gerard Mayo has really shown he's got some coaching chops. And you're right, they're playing so hard for him. They'll keep themselves in quite a lot of games and may well inadvertently take themselves away from being able to pick an elite talent in the draft, because they may just pick up too many wins. But yeah, this Thursday night game should be quite a fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's what makes this game interesting, because I think we're going to learn lots about both teams. Because, well, again, it's a division game. You mentioned it there, and division games are different, but Robert Saleh has really struggled to win games in this division. I mentioned this stat last week. He is 4-14 against the AFC East. And bear in mind, there have been some pretty terrible teams in the AFC East over his tenure. It's not like it's not like it's in the AFC North, for example. They've been outcoached on both sides of the ball a lot. The Niners did that to them as well. And if it wasn't for Will Levis's fumble, then the game was trending in a different direction there as well. So if the Jets want a playoff spot, if they let alone win a division, which is what they all want to do, obviously they're up there in the odds of the Bills. They have to win games in the AFC East, and they're coming up against a team that is very well coached. This is the time for Robert Saleh to show that he is a good coach, because if he loses this game, then the questions are really going to start to be asked.
Yeah, I mean, if they can't put together a playoff run this season, then you've got to think they consider other coaching options, because they're in win now mode with the way the roster's put together, and you don't go and get Aaron Rodgers at his age if you aren't in win now mode. So if Robert Saleh can't get it done in the division, they're going to have to look elsewhere.
Absolutely. So just quickly before we go on to be predicting the rest of the slate, the Jets have got to get the run game going to win this game. New England are the second best team against the run this year, so that is a bit of a worry. But if they can get Hull and Braden Allen going like the second half of last week, then it will open up the whole offense, and that's what we saw in the second half of the game last week. They've got to protect Rodgers like last week as well, because the offensive line played very well last year. Just one pressure on him in the game, which is compared to what we've seen the Jets offensive line previously. They've reworked it. They've been performing well. They just need to stay healthy, and I think that's a big key. And I think they've got to improve their run defense. You mentioned it a lot. Their defense has been not very good this year, especially stopping the run. The Niners ran away with them. The Titans ran away with them. And New England, again, they've had some success running the football. They've got to try and stop that. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a tough ask for the Jets. As for the Patriots, like I said, they've got to run the ball, because they found success against the Bengals, against the Seahawks, around 180 yards in both games. And with how the Jets have been this year, it's very smart to go very run heavy in this straight away. if they take away Garrett Wilson again, I think the Jets are vulnerable. They're a great man coverage team. If you put Gonzalez on him, or if you put two of the other corners on him, you can take away Rodgers' best target, and then he'll have to adapt, throw to Alan Lazard or Mike Williams, who's seen hardly any targets this season. Titans did a good job at taking away Wilson in the first half. And then, New England are great on special teams. They've always have been, and that's continued with Gerard Mayo. He's already down. The Patriots have already down 6 punts inside the 20 in the first 2 games. That's the second most on any team. So they're going to force the Jets to start deep in their own half. So that's certainly what to look for in this game. You've said that you think it's going to be a close one. Again, so the Jets are favored by 6.5. For me, I'd pick the Patriots to cover that, but I'm not so certain they win. But I think it's going to be a very close game, and yeah, we'll see what happens. But I don't like the Jets being that big of a favourite.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't have enough confidence in them. I can see the Patriots keeping it closer than that. I still think the Jets will win, but I think they're going to squeak by.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's go through the rest of the week 3 slate, picking our winners against the spread. And we'll start in Cleveland, where the Browns host the Giants. This game does not look good compared to some of the rest in the slate, but it's certainly going to learn some things about the teams in this game compared to what we knew before. The Browns are favoured by 6.5. I'm going to pick the Browns to cover that, but I'm not confident. I just think that their defense is going to frustrate the hell out of the Giants' offense.
Yeah, I feel the same. I don't feel good about it at all. There's not many teams I would say that the Browns would cover 6.5 against, but this Giants team looks pretty woeful. So by default, Cleveland to cover.
Awesome. Right, we'll go over to Indianapolis now, where the Colts host at your Bears, Ben. The Colts are 1.5 point favourites, which is an interesting spread. Probably... Yeah, this is tough. I think it's normally 2.5 that a home team would get given, so they're sort of suggesting that the Bears are favourites in this one. They're at home, so I'm going to pick the Colts to cover. But this game is fascinating.
Yeah, I think the Bears, based on that Bears defense and what it's done, the Bears defense kept them in that game against Houston, and Houston's a hell of a lot better than Indianapolis. This might be the game the Bears need for their offense. The offensive line has been so bad, but the Indianapolis pass rush has been pretty minimal so far this season, and I think that's the thing that will help Chicago more than anything. So I think the Bears will cover that tiny line.
Yeah, hopefully, see some growth from Kelly Williams in this game too. We'll stick in the NFC North. We'll go over to Minnesota now. They host the Texans. The Texans are 2.5 point favourites on the road. This is a fun one with how both teams look. They're both 2-0 as well. Even though the Texans struggled against the Bears defense last week, I think I don't know. I just felt they got too much talent to lose this game. But again, Brian Flores' defense could make this one frisky.
Yeah, it's such a great one to have in that 6 p.m. window. Red zone will be a lot of fun. Yeah, I have to go with the Texans as well. As impressive as the Vikings have been, it just shows kind of how much confidence I've got in the Texans, because I am now a believer of the Vikings, but that Texans team I think is going to be too good. So I think they'll cover.
Awesome. We'll go over to New Orleans now. The 2-0 Saints host the Eagles. The Saints are favoured in this one by 2.5 points. This one should be interesting as well. There's quite a few games in the early window. I'm gonna pick the Eagles to cover. I feel like they need a win more than anything as well, because they've been up and down. They've so far. Coming off a short week, to be fair, but I just thought they need it, because if the Eagles start 1-2, then serious questions are going to start ringing around again, and I feel like they're probably going to need this one more than the Saints will.
Yeah, over the last couple of days, that's where I've been. The Eagles have got to get good at some point and be able to beat someone like this. But just going back and watching more of the Saints, I just feel like that line isn't massive. They're at home. It's perhaps a bit of a generous line in terms of the Eagles, considering how they've played, and maybe a little bit of disrespect to New Orleans. So I'm actually going to go with the Saints to cover this, but that's a bad day in the office for the Eagles, because going 1-2 at this point with Super Bowl aspirations is not great.
Well, especially with the amount of money they're paying their two coordinators as well. So, certainly going to be some questions ringing around there. Two more 2-0 teams meet in the AFC. The Steelers host the Chargers. The Steelers are favored by 2.5 points as well. This one, I'm going to pick the Chargers to cover. I probably think they're going to win as well. I think they're really... These two teams are quite well matched, actually. Two well-coached teams, obviously Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. Justin Herbert didn't look great last week, but I think their run game is better than the Steelers' run game, and I think that's what will win them this game. The Chargers look great running the football. Steelers look good too, but I trust Justin Herbert more of the game line than I trust Justin Fields, and I don't trust Justin Herbert that much at all. So I think, I think that's saying something. But yeah, give me the Chargers. But this one, I think, it could go either way. Coin flip.
Yeah, the Chargers have taken a lot of pressure off Justin Herbert with the way that they've been so run heavy, and Jim Harbaugh loves that. So it's working for them. The thing that's bothered me about the Steelers is they've been winning, but they've been struggling to finish drives. So many field goals when touchdowns seem to go begging. I'm going to go Chargers to cover on this.
Yeah, nice one. We'll have a 2-0 team in the Bucks meet an 0-2 team in the Broncos. The Bucks are at home. They're favored by 6.5. I think that spread's a bit light, to be honest with you. I think the Bucks are gonna win this game by quite a lot. Give me the Bucks to win this one. I'm not very confident about Denver getting many wins at all this year.
No, and this is one I feel so confident about that it worries me. I'm so confident the Bucks will cover that there's got to be something wrong, because these are the ones that I've been getting wrong. There seems like there's such a gap between these two teams, really, and they're at such different stages of their development that for it only to be 6.5 feels rather generous to the Broncos, considering everything we've seen out of Denver. So yeah, give me the Bucks to cover on that one.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. Okay, we'll go to Tennessee now, where Malik Willis will have a bit of a revenge game going into Tennessee. The Packers at 1-1 and the Titans at 0-2. It looks like a BB Willis, but we could see Jordan Love sit up. We don't know. With the Titans are 2.5 point favourites in this one, but with the way the Green Bay looked last week and with the way the Titans and Will Levis I'm going to pick the Packers to cover that.
I think at some point Will Levis will stop making quite as many mistakes, even if they just tell him, okay, we're not going to throw the ball as much as we have. There were certain things in the Packers offensive game plan that just didn't look great because of it being Malik Willis, and they were determined to just have to make sure that Malik Willis didn't have to do too much. I think the Titans can cover and win this one. It's one of the only ways that they are going to beat the Packers is if Jordan Love is out and Will Levis stops making mistakes. It's going to be an interesting one. Perhaps not the best game of the week, but it's a chance for the Titans to kind of get their season back on track. If the Packers lose and they go to 1-2, I think they'll feel, okay, well, if we're getting Jordan Love back, that's not too bad. We'll have settled for that. It's not like we're 0-3 and he's got a mountain to climb. So yeah, I'm going to go with Titans to pull it out.
Awesome. And then we'll go over to the late window now, where the Raiders host the Panthers. The Raiders 1-1, the Panthers 0-2. The Raiders favored by 5.5. That line came down after Bryce Young was benched, which is I think pretty much shows how they feel about him. I'm going to pick the Raiders to cover just because I don't think the Panthers are very talented at all. But we'll see what Andy Dalton can throw up.
Yeah, my prediction is I'm not going to watch this game. Yeah, no, I think it has to be. I think it has to be the Raiders. Andy Dalton can make the Panthers more competitive, and like I've said, what's the end game in that? What's the point in winning in a couple of extra games? I think he can make it closer right now than Bryce Young will have done, but I still think this Raiders team beat the Ravens, and yes, they're a bit lucky. As long as they're not looking ahead and looking past the Panthers, thinking, okay, well, it's the Panthers, they suck, we're going to win. If they don't look at it like that, they're going to cover.
There we are. The Seahawks, they're 2-0. Their defense has looked great so far this year as well. They are favourites at home against Miami. The 4.5 point favourites. I'm going to pick Miami to cover in this one. I don't think they win, but that's quite a big spread. And if Skylar Thompson plays like he did in the playoff game against Buffalo, then the Dolphins are going to have a chance in this game because he played very well in that game. If he played like he did, in the regular season that season, then we may see something different. We may see Seattle run away with this one. But the Dolphins are quite confident in Skylar Thompson. He beat out Mike White for the backup job. And again, he did play well in that playoff game a couple of years ago as well. So I'm going to pick the Dolphins to cover. I don't think they win this game. But 4.5 is quite a big spread.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing is that with a full week, well, more than a full week, because after the mini bye, a full week of reps, we should be able to see him at his best. And, it's not like Tua has been lighting it up anyway. So perhaps replacing him, it isn't the world's biggest downgrade. But having to travel cross country, difficult place to play, Seattle, their tails are up. They're perhaps the quietest 2-0 team in the league right now in terms of the publicity that they're getting. I think the Dolphins are in a difficult situation here. And I think the Seahawks can cover this spread.
It'll be an interesting one for sure, and it's one game I'm sneakily looking forward to watching. But there are 3 better games in the late window. We'll start with the first one: the Cardinals hosting the Lions. The Lions are 3.5 point favourites on the road, despite how good the Cardinals looked last week. Now this is a very interesting spread. For me, I think the Lions are going to have a bounce back game. I think they will cover and win, of course, but. Potentially, but for me, I think Campbell has them drilled. They're going to have a bounce back game, and I think they might win this one big.
Yeah, I don't see them losing 2 in a row. I think they're too good for that. Jared Goff's amazing indoors as well, so I'm reasonably confident the Lions can cover this. But yeah, it should be a really good game. I'm more interested to see kind of what can Arizona show against a team like Detroit. I think I know what I'm going to see from the Lions, but the Cardinals, I'm looking to be impressed, but I think the Lions will cover.
Big hope for the Cardinals as well, because Kyler Murray was excellent last week. He had one of the biggest PFF grades from a quarterback you will ever see. Certainly one of the biggest this season with 96.5. That's a really good grade, so just shows how well he played last week. And then we'll go over to Dallas. They host the Ravens. This one's massive for both teams because both teams had disappointing losses last year. The Ravens failed by 1.5, even despite it being in Dallas. I think the Ravens are better, so I'm going to pick them to cover. But this game any team could win it.
Yeah, it's one of those where it worries me because both teams worry me a little bit, and I'm kind of thinking, should it be the home advantage? Should it be that's what does it? But no, I don't think it will. And when I look at these teams, who do I feel a bit more confident in? And it's actually the road team, and I think they're going.
That's exactly how I feel, exactly. And then the final game of the late window, the Rams host the Niners. Now, this spread surprised me a little bit because, yes, the Rams are banged up, but the Niners are also banged up. The Niners are favoured by 7.5 points on the road in LA. Now, Shanahan does have the better over McVay recently, but with how both teams are banged up, they know each other so well. I think it will be a close game, so I'm going to pick the Rams to cover. Whether they win or not is different, but that spread's massive.
It is massive, and I think only the Bengals against the Commanders have got a bigger spread as it stands right now. And the Rams are a good team. It's just that roster feels really thin. So I'm trying to balance this out in my head because we know how good the 49ers are and how good they were against the Jets. They just hammered a really good team there. And then they really got taken down a peg by Minnesota. There is so much talent on that 49ers roster. This is the toughest one on the slate for me. And I'm gonna say the 49ers are gonna cover. And I'm really surprised because that line is eye-watering, all things considered. But yeah, they're good on this. They're good when they're still on the West Coast. Yeah. I'm going to not talk myself out of it, Sam. I'm going to say 49ers to cover.
There we are. And then Sunday Night Football, the Falcons welcome the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 3.5-point favourites on the road. The Falcons, good drive for Kirk Cousins, winning in prime time as well, which has been a big thing for him, struggling in prime time. But the Chiefs don't really lose these kind of games. I'm going to pick them to go 3-0 on the year.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that like the Falcons have been really quite intriguing this season, but do you fancy them to beat the Chiefs? It's tough, even at home. Kirk Cousins, maybe his primetime woes are over, but no, I can't see it. There'll be a point this season where the Chiefs don't get so lucky as I feel like they have done the first 2 weeks. But on paper, this is the easiest game the Chiefs have had all year. So, okay, I will say they are going to cover.
There we are. And then there's 2 games on Monday Night Football. The first, the Jags going to Buffalo. The Bills are 5.5-point favourites. With the way Buffalo looked last week, they got, again, a mini bye as well. I'm going to pick them to cover, but this game should be interesting, and the Jags really do need a win.
Yeah, it's another one of those lines that really pains me. I'm going to say Buffalo, but I don't love it. I don't love the line of 5 because I know that the Jags have got it in them to keep it close, and they're really fighting for their season at this point. I know we talked earlier on in the show. 0-3 would feel pretty disastrous for them. But based on what we saw last week, the Bills are just rolling right now. They really feel like mid-season form and that they've got it figured out. So I'm going to say the Bills will cover.
And then the final game, this is the one that's on Channel 5 this week, so for free for UK viewers. The Bengals host the Commanders. Like you mentioned there, the massive spread. And I'm going to take the Bengals to cover that and get the first win of the season.
Yeah, I'm reasonably confident on this one. The Commanders have been fun to watch at times, but like I say, Jaden Daniels is very keen to run each time. He's been good at evading pressure, but the Commanders are very much an early work in progress. The Bengals, meanwhile, really need to get one back in the win column. This is the perfect game for them. Have this. They've got a little bit more rest. They've got a team they should certainly beat, but obviously we were in that situation before in week 1 with a team they should beat, but this is a team that's built differently. The Bengals are going to cover. I'm pretty confident.
Yeah, Lou and Rumo can probably put up a good game plan against a rookie quarterback as well. So
Yes.
we'll see what happens there, because he had a good one last week, and then the defense needs to play well to win games because it disappointed against the Patriots. Well, that's it. That is week 2 debrief. That's week 3 preview. Thank you very much for joining me, Ben. It's been great to have you on the podcast, and you're very welcome on again.
Yeah, well, anytime. Always love coming on talking football with you, Sam.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We will see you this time next week, where we will look ahead to Thursday Night Football again. We will also debrief all the latest news in the NFL. This is our new weekly slot every Wednesday. Changing things up with the podcast, but I feel like this one's probably the best product we can give you at the moment right now. So thank you for joining us on the 14 Yards NFL Podcast. I've been Sam. He's been Ben Isaacs. Thank you for coming on, mate. And we'll see you after week 3.